May 17, 1945, dawn 14:23 hours. A detention facility near Lüneburg, northern Germany. Rain hammers the corrugated roof. Greta Müller stands in the processing line, her Wehrmacht Helferin uniform soaked through, watching the British sergeant at the intake desk. He's writing something in a ledger with careful precision. When her turn comes, he looks up. "Name?" he asks through an interpreter. She gives it, expecting a slap, a shove, rough hands. Instead, he slides a tin cup across the table. Steam rises from it. "Tea," he says in broken German. "You'll want to sit, processing takes time." The cup is warm in her hands. She doesn't understand. She doesn't understand anything anymore. If you're interested in the untold stories of how humanity survived the darkest chapter of the 20th century, hit that subscribe button now. These accounts challenge everything we think we know about enemies, allies, and what happens when propaganda collides with reality. They had been told many things: that the British were weak, soft, decadent, that their empire was crumbling, their soldiers cowards who ran at Dunkirk, that if captured, German women would face unspeakable brutality, the kind reserved for those who served the Reich in any capacity. By 1945, over 500,000 German women had served as Wehrmacht auxiliaries, telephone operators, clerks, meteorologists, anti-aircraft spotters. They weren't soldiers, but they wore uniforms. They served the war machine. And when Germany collapsed, thousands found themselves in British custody. They expected punishment. They expected vengeance. What they got was something far more confusing. The first crack came within hours. Greta finished her tea. Real tea, not the ersatz bark and chicory they'd been drinking for 2 years, and was led to a makeshift medical station. A British Army nurse waited there, clipboard in hand, stethoscope around her neck. The nurse gestured to a chair. Greta sat. The examination was thorough but gentle. Temperature taken, throat checked, eyes examined for signs of disease. The nurse made notes, asked questions through the interpreter about conditions, allergies, injuries. At one point, Greta flinched when the nurse reached toward her shoulder. The nurse stopped immediately, held up both hands. "I'm checking for lice," she said softly. "That's all, I won't hurt you." The words made no sense. Why would an enemy nurse promise not to hurt you? Why would she care? But the gentleness in her voice was unmistakable. When a minor wound on Greta's arm was discovered, barbed wire 2 days prior, the nurse cleaned and dressed it carefully. She used antiseptic, real bandages, not rags. "You'll need to keep this clean," the nurse said. "Come back in 3 days so we can check it." 3 days, as if Greta had a future. Britain held around 400,000 German prisoners by 1946 with treatment that was strict but humane. Fewer prisoners died in British captivity than in other Allied nations. This wasn't accidental, it was policy. The Geneva Convention of 1929 established clear protocols. Prisoners were to be housed adequately, fed sufficiently, and protected from violence. The British government introduced a re-education program to show the evils of the Nazi regime while promoting democracy. But beyond legality, there was something else. A cultural commitment to order, to standards, to the idea that how you treat your enemies defines who you are. The women auxiliaries presented a unique challenge. They weren't frontline combatants, yet they'd served the Wehrmacht. Screenings were conducted to identify war crime connections. The rest were processed as displaced persons or auxiliary personnel, technically not POWs under strict definition, but under Allied control nonetheless. Mortality rates were low, inspections were regular. The Red Cross monitored conditions. The message was clear: we will not become what we defeated. Processing took 2 days. The women were divided into groups based on their roles and security classifications. Greta's group, communications personnel, had no war crimes ties. They were assigned to a former Wehrmacht barracks converted into Allied holding facilities. The barracks were sparse but clean. Metal beds, thin mattresses, wool blankets folded neatly. Greta sat on her assigned bed and ran her hand across the blanket. It was thick, warm, whole. For months she'd slept under coats and torn curtains as the Eastern Front collapsed. A British corporal appeared at the door with an armful of folded clothes. "1 dress each," he announced. "Gray, standard issue. Your uniforms will be stored." The dresses were simple, shapeless, but clean, free of blood, mud, or the smell of defeat. That night, after lights out, Greta heard quiet crying from several beds. Not loud sobbing, just exhausted tears. The tears of women who'd been braced for horror and instead received indifference at worst, basic decency at best. The confusion was its own kind of torture. Mornings began at 6:30 with a bell. The women rose, made beds, lined up for breakfast in the communal mess area. Porridge with a spoonful of jam, bread, real bread, and tea or powdered milk. It wasn't luxury, but it was consistent. And that consistency felt alien after years of chaos. After breakfast, work assignments were posted. German POWs worked in various roles, mostly agricultural or industrial, and were paid according to their status and work. The women were assigned to laundry details, kitchen assistants, or clerical tasks. Greta was sent to the camp administrative office, sorting papers and translating when needed. Her supervisor, a bespectacled British lieutenant named Hargreaves, spoke to her the way one might to any clerk. These files need organizing by date, then alphabetical. No shouting, no contempt, just instructions. One afternoon, Greta made an error, misfiled an entire folder. She froze, waiting for the rebuke she thought inevitable. Hargreaves sighed, pulled the folder out, and handed it back. "Try again," he said calmly. "Happens to everyone, that was all." She stood there, stunned by the absence of punishment. The turning point came in late June. A group of British soldiers was rotating home after months of occupation duty. The women watched from behind the wire as trucks were loaded. Men laughed and joked, cigarettes passed around. One soldier noticed the women watching. He waved, just a casual human gesture. Several women instinctively waved back. Enemies don't wave at each other. But these men didn't look like enemies. They looked like boys eager to go home. That evening, a tall Yorkshire guard named Private Davies stood near the women's barracks, smoking and looking bored. Greta approached the wire cautiously. "Excuse me," she said in halting English. Davies looked up. "Yeah? Why are you kind?" she asked, struggling for words. Davies shrugged. "War's over, innit? You're just people now." Just people. She'd been called many things, auxiliary, asset, cog in the machine, but not people in a very long time. Davies flicked his cigarette and walked on. Greta stayed by the fence long after he left. By August, restrictions had loosened. Women with clean records and cooperation were allowed to work outside, mostly on farms suffering severe labor shortages. Greta was assigned to a dairy farm in Hampshire, run by an older couple, the Wainwrights. She was escorted there by a corporal who left her at the farmhouse door. No chains, no guards standing watch. Mrs. Wainwright, a woman in her 60s with calloused hands and a no-nonsense stare, looked Greta up and down. "You know how to milk a cow?" "No, ma'am." "You'll learn. Come on." The work was hard. 6 cows twice daily, hauling feed, cleaning stalls, but midday brought something she didn't expect. Lunch at the family table. Cheese sandwiches, pickles, strong tea. "Sit," Mrs. Wainwright said. Greta hesitated. "Sit," the woman repeated, firmer this time. Greta sat. The clock ticked. They ate in silence. Finally, Mr. Wainwright spoke. "Lost our son at Arnhem," he said quietly. Greta froze, staring at her plate. I'm sorry," he nodded. "Wasn't your fault, wasn't ours either. Just the bloody war." That night, back in her cot, Greta couldn't reconcile it. A British couple who'd lost their son had fed her, taught her, treated her like a worker, not a prisoner. She tried to summon hatred for them, couldn't find it. Tried to summon pride in the Reich, found only ash. In September, the women gathered in the recreation hall for a re-education film. They filed in reluctantly, expecting propaganda. What they saw instead was horror. Footage from Bergen-Belsen from Dachau. Skeletal bodies piled like cordwood. Living ghosts with hollow eyes. Gas chambers, crematoria. Some women turned away, others wept. A few sat stone-faced, refusing to believe. Greta watched in silence, her hands clenched. She'd heard whispers during the war, rumors of camps, but believed the propaganda. Those rumors were enemy lies, they'd said. Exaggerations, this was no exaggeration. When the film ended, a British officer stood before them. "This is what you served," he said quietly. "Not all of you knew, but all of you enabled it." The words landed like stones in a still pond. That night, debates erupted in the dormitory. "It's fake," insisted Ursula, a former radio operator. "British propaganda to make us feel ashamed." "You're a fool," snapped Helga, who'd been weeping since the film. "My cousin worked near Dachau. She told me things I didn't want to believe." "Even if it's true," Ursula countered, "we were following orders." "We had no choice," Greta spoke softly. "We had a choice. We chose not to ask questions." Silence fell. Because that was it, the truth. They'd chosen comfort over curiosity, obedience over doubt, and millions had died for those small, cowardly choices. If this story is making you think, making you uncomfortable in the right ways, subscribe now. History's hardest truths are the ones we need most. By 1947, something remarkable was happening. Once bans on romantic relationships lifted, nearly 800 marriages between German POWs and British citizens occurred. These weren't between auxiliaries and British women. Regulations differed. But the trend showed something larger. Former enemies were becoming neighbors, colleagues, even family. Greta saw this change firsthand when she met Thomas, a British sergeant in the administrative office. Quiet, methodical, ink-stained fingers, dry humor. They didn't flirt. Regulations forbade it, and both were cautious. But they talked during tea breaks about books, the farm, and Thomas's dream to become a school teacher. One day he asked, "What will you do after?" Greta paused. "I don't know. Go back to Germany, I suppose." Thomas frowned. To what? She had no answer. Her family home in Hamburg was rubble. Her parents dead from the firebombing. Her brother missing on the Eastern Front. There was nothing to return to. Thomas looked at her gently. "There are resettlement programs if you wanted to stay in Britain." She blinked. Stay? In the land of her captors? Why not? Because they were enemies. Because she'd served the Reich. Because she couldn't finish the thought. The reasons had stopped making sense. October 1946. Greta stood before a mirror in the washroom, staring at her reflection. She barely recognized herself, cheeks fuller, skin warm, eyes alive again. Behind her, Helga combed her hair. Ursula washed her face. They all looked different. Rested, nourished, transformed from the hollow-eyed ghosts who'd arrived 17 months earlier. The British had done this. The enemy had restored them to health while Germany lay in ruins. And Greta couldn't stop wondering what that meant. She thought of the propaganda she'd believed. The speeches about British weakness, Aryan superiority, and the righteousness of German strength. All of it lies. The strongest thing the British had done was show restraint. To treat enemies like humans. To refuse to become monsters in order to fight monsters. That restraint had done what no weapon could. It had demolished her certainty. Greta turned from the mirror and walked outside into the pale autumn light. Davies was on fence duty again, smoking as always. She approached the wire. Private Davies. He looked over. "Yeah?" "Thank you," she said simply. He frowned, confused. "For what?" "For treating us like people." Davies looked embarrassed, shifting his weight. "Just doing me job, love." But it wasn't just a job, it was a choice. Every small kindness had been a choice, and those choices had changed everything. Repatriation of German prisoners began in September 1946. The women were offered the option to return home or apply for resettlement if they had no family left. Greta chose to stay, not because she'd stopped being German, but because the Germany she'd known, the one she believed in, no longer existed. Perhaps it never had. She stayed in Hampshire, working on the Wayrite farm. Eventually, she married a local man she met at church. Not Thomas. He'd moved on to teach elsewhere, but someone equally kind, equally ordinary. She never forgot what she learned after the war. That propaganda is poison. That enemies can be more humane than leaders. That true strength lies in restraint. Years later, in 1962, Greta's young daughter asked her about the war. "Were you scared?" the girl asked. "When you were captured?" Greta thought carefully before answering. "Yes," she said at last, "but not of what I expected. I was scared because they were kind." The girl frowned. "Why is kindness scary?" "Because it makes you question everything you were taught to believe," Greta said softly. "And once you start questioning, you can never stop." She poured her daughter a cup of tea, real tea, strong and dark, and set it on the table. "Remember this," she said, "how people treat you when they don't have to tells you who they are. Your grandfather fought against them," she continued. "But when they won, they didn't gloat. They didn't take revenge, they just made tea. And that," Greta said, "changed everything." If this story challenged something you thought you knew about war, about enemies, about what victory really looks like, listen closely. History's lessons aren't in the battles or the weapons. They're in the moments of mercy that refuse to vanish, even in the ruins of hatred. Do me a favor and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because these stories matter. They remind us what civilization really means. Even in humanity's darkest hours, there were people who chose decency over cruelty, restraint over revenge, civilization over chaos. The cup of tea Greta held that first day wasn't just a drink. It was a declaration that even in defeat, human dignity would be honored. Sometimes the strongest weapon is the one you choose not to use.